In the quiet reaches of the Andromeda sector, a fragile peace had endured for decades, held together by an uneasy alliance of diverse alien species. These civilizations, each unique in culture and technology, had learned the value of cooperation to protect the vast and precious star systems that stretched across the endless void. The coalition was a marvel of diplomacy and science, where disputes were settled not by battle, but by negotiation, and advanced technology was shared to ensure mutual survival. It was a time when the stars shone peacefully, and no one dared disturb the delicate balance that had been painstakingly built. Yet, even in such a time of calm, shadows could not be kept at bay forever. From the distant fringes of the sector, past well-charted territories and safe routes, an unusual signal pierced the stillness. It was faint at first, barely detectable through the sophisticated scanners of the Coalition's Central Command. But as hours passed, the signal grew stronger, more urgent, carrying with it a warning that could no longer be ignored. Something unknown was moving swiftly toward the heart of the Coalition's domain. A fleet unlike any recorded in history, composed of ships whose design defied logic and whose technology shimmered with unfamiliar energy signatures. The fleet advanced relentlessly, leaving a trail of disruption in its wake. Scientists scrambled to understand its origin, but their efforts were met with frustration. The ships emitted no known language or communication pattern. No message came from them, no attempt to parley or negotiate. It was as if the fleet's purpose was simply to conquer or destroy, a threat that unsettled even the most experienced leaders of the coalition. The news spread quickly through the halls of power, stirring unease and heated debate. Should the coalition face this menace with their own forces, risking the star systems they had so carefully protected? Or should they consider calling in human warships, a choice many feared despite the humans' well-known reputation? Humans were known for their boldness and courage, but also for their unpredictable and sometimes reckless tactics. On Earth, they had a history marked by devastating wars and conflicts that nearly tore their own planet apart. Many in the coalition viewed them as a dangerous wild card, a force that could just as easily cause more harm than good. Yet others believed that humanity's resilience and spirit of innovation might be exactly what was needed against this mysterious enemy. The discussions were intense, often interrupted by the growing reports of the fleet's advance. Every passing hour brought the threat closer to the coalition's borders, narrowing the window for decisive action. In the command center, a council of representatives from the major species gathered, their faces etched with concern. Each voiced fears and hopes, but none could ignore the possibility that their peaceful era might soon come to a violent end. As debates raged, some whispered of legends that spoke of humanity's unique ability to adapt and fight when pushed to the edge. Others warned that sending human warships could ignite a larger conflict that the coalition was unprepared to handle. Meanwhile, back in the quieter sectors, ordinary citizens watched the stars with growing anxiety. Ships that once passed calmly between colonies now moved faster, more alert, as if sensing the rising tension. Markets and communication hubs buzzed, with rumors and speculation. Families clung to each other, hoping their homes would remain safe in the storm that seemed inevitable. Amid this turmoil, the mysterious fleet grew ever closer, its presence a dark cloud hanging over the hopes of peace. Sensors aboard coalition vessels picked up strange energy pulses that danced like ghostly lights against the cold backdrop of space. Scientists worked through endless nights trying to decode the fleet's technology, desperate to find a weakness or a clue to its intentions. Every attempt to scan deeper was met with interference, as if the fleet itself was alive and aware of their probing. The tension was palpable, a heavy silence waiting to break into chaos. The coalition's leaders knew that the coming days would define the future of the sector. If the unknown fleet was allowed to reach the core worlds, entire civilizations could fall, star systems could be lost forever, and the dream of peaceful coexistence might be shattered. The choice before them was impossible. Rely on their own cautious but slower response or unleash the humans, whose fierce reputation could either save the day or doom them all. In the quiet moments between meetings, some commanders stared out at the stars, wondering if the stories about humans were true, their capacity for great destruction balanced by an unmatched drive to protect what they loved. They wondered if this force could truly be tamed and guided to fight alongside them, or if it would become the very storm that destroyed the calm they had fought so hard to maintain. As the unknown fleet continued its steady advance, the coalition prepared for what might be the greatest test of their unity. Every ship was readying for battle, every scientist double-checking their data, every leader bracing for decisions that could change history. And somewhere deep in the vastness of space, the humans awaited their call, unaware that their moment to prove themselves was fast approaching, a moment that could turn the tide of the galaxy's fate forever. Despite the warnings and protests from many within the coalition, the decision was made to deploy the human warships to the front lines. The leaders debated long and hard, their voices echoing in the grand halls where the fate of entire star systems was weighed and measured. But ultimately, the growing threat from the unknown fleet left them with no other option. The humans, with their reputation for both brilliance and recklessness, had to be called upon. At the center of this bold move stood Captain Asha Vega, a figure both respected and feared across human space. Known for her sharp mind and unyielding spirit, Vega commanded her fleet with a confidence born from countless battles and survival against impossible odds. When the human warships slipped into the coalition's territory, their arrival sent shockwaves through the Allied forces. Sleek and unlike anything the coalition had ever seen, the human ships moved with a speed and grace that caught even the most experienced commanders off guard. Yet beneath their impressive appearance was something more. Unsettling, the humans fought differently. Where the coalition valued careful strategy and coordinated strikes, the humans relied on instinct, improvisation, and a kind of daring that seemed reckless at first glance. Their tactics were unpredictable, often bold to the point of defiance, against standard military protocol. Coalition commanders watched with a mixture of awe and unease as the human ships darted through enemy lines, striking hard and fast, then slipping away before retaliation could come. This unorthodox style caused some within the coalition to fear that inviting humans to the battle might ignite chaos instead of quelling it. Reports came in of collateral damage and near misses, where human maneuvers, while effective, disrupted the carefully planned defenses of Allied forces. The Council debated whether to restrain the humans or even pull them back entirely, worried that their presence could escalate the conflict beyond control. But Captain Vega stood firm. In her calm yet firm voice, she explained that humanity's greatest strength lay in their resilience and passion for protecting the stars they called home. She reminded the coalition that humans had faced extinction and emerged stronger, not by playing safe, but by daring to take risks when it mattered most. Her crew, loyal and skilled, trusted her implicitly, ready to follow her into any storm. Meanwhile, the unknown enemy fleet continued its advance, growing bolder as the battle intensified. The human warships, despite their unconventional methods, became a beacon of hope for many coalition forces, inspiring courage where fear once took hold. Every engagement was a dance of chaos and control, where human ships wove through enemy fire, their pilots reading the stars as if they held the secrets to victory. The coalition began to see that the humans' unpredictability was not recklessness, but a kind of genius, an ability to adapt and innovate in the heat of battle that the enemy could not anticipate. Yet the tension remained. Some commanders whispered in private that trusting humans was like handing the galaxy's fate to a wild storm. Others argued that without their fiery spirit, all might already be lost. Captain Vega understood the doubts but refused to be deterred. She believed that the love of the stars, the desire to protect life in all its forms, burned brightest in humanity's heart. As battles raged and stars blazed across the void, the stage was set for a struggle not just of technology and power, but of wills and beliefs. The coalition and the humans stood together, uneasy allies against a threat that neither fully understood. In the quiet moments between clashes, Vega's mind raced with plans and possibilities. She knew this fight would demand everything from her crew testing their limits and forcing them to grow in ways they had never imagined. But she also knew that in the depths of space, where darkness seemed endless, it was the human spirit, bold, fierce, and unyielding, that might just turn the tide and protect the stars for generations to come. The battle had escalated beyond anyone's expectations, and as the human warships dove into the heart of the mysterious enemy fleet, their aggressive style of combat quickly became a source of both hope and deep concern. Unlike the coalition's measured and precise approach, the humans fought with a fierce intensity that seemed almost reckless. Their ships tore through enemy lines with raw power and daring maneuvers, often putting themselves in great danger to strike critical blows. But this aggression came with a heavy price. The very tactics that made the humans effective also caused unintended damage to nearby Allied territories. Several coalition outposts previously thought secure were caught in the crossfire or damaged by the rapid movements of human vessels. Repair crews scrambled desperately to fix the damage, trying to maintain defensive lines while the war raged on. Among the coalition leaders, frustration and fear began to grow. Meetings that were once focused on strategy turned into heated arguments. Many blamed Captain Asha Vega and her crew, accusing them of putting the coalition's resources and lives at risk with their unpredictable methods. Vega, however, stood her ground, insisting that the stakes were too high for caution to rule every decision. She argued passionately that sometimes bold risks were the only way to defend freedom and prevent total destruction. To her, hesitation in the face of such a threat was a form of surrender. The tension between the human captain and coalition officials became a battleground in its own right, their disagreements echoing the larger conflict unfolding in space. While the coalition's representatives sought control and order, Vega embodied a spirit that refused to be confined by tradition or protocol. Yet as these internal conflicts played out, the enemy revealed something far more terrifying. In the midst of the chaos, they unleashed a devastating new weapon, technology capable of manipulating star energy itself. This power allowed the enemy to pull energy directly from stars, creating violent bursts of light and heat that could consume entire star systems. Coalition scientists and commanders watched in horror as neighboring solar systems were destabilized, their suns flickering dangerously under the strain. The threat was no longer just about fleets and firepower. It had grown into a cosmic danger that could erase worlds. Attempts to understand and counter this technology were complicated by the enemy's secrecy and speed. Every time coalition researchers thought they had made progress, the enemy adapted, shutting down their efforts with swift and brutal countermeasures. This display of overwhelming power deepened the urgency of the human involvement. Despite the tension, it became clear that Captain Vega's boldness might be the key to facing such a threat. The coalition, although wary, began to see that human unpredictability and willingness to act quickly could provide opportunities their own cautious methods lacked. Vega and her crew pushed forward, exploring unconventional strategies to confront the star-consuming weapon. In the heat of battle, she encouraged cooperation between human pilots and coalition forces, trying to bridge the gap between differing styles and philosophies. Slowly, mutual respect began to form, though old doubts still lingered beneath the surface. Meanwhile, the enemy's manipulation of star energy continued to wreak havoc, forcing entire fleets to evacuate threatened systems, leaving once vibrant colonies ghostly and silent. The stars themselves seemed to cry out, their light dimming, as if warning all who watched that the galaxy faced an unimaginable peril. In response, the coalition worked feverishly to develop defensive technologies, while human crews experimented with risky maneuvers designed to disrupt the enemy's energy harvesting. Every mission was a dangerous gamble, with lives and worlds hanging in the balance. As the clash of ideals between caution and courage unfolded, so too did the battle for survival reach new heights of intensity. Captain Vega remained a symbol of hope and defiance, a living reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers demanded the greatest bravery. Her words echoed among her crew and the coalition alike, that freedom was worth fighting for, even if the path was uncertain and fraught with risk. In the vast silence of space where stars burned and died, the struggle continued, a desperate fight not just for territory or power, but for the very right to live and dream beneath the stars' eternal light. The future of the Andromeda sector hung in the balance, shaped by choices made in moments of fear, courage, and unyielding resolve. As the enemy fleet grew stronger and the light of once bright stars began to fade under the strain of their energy-draining weapons, the coalition found itself dangerously close to collapse, with even their most advanced defenses proving helpless against this strange and terrifying technology. For the first time in decades, the coalition leaders, proud and cautious by nature, fully opened their doors to humanity. Not out of desperation alone, but because they began to see something different in them, something they lacked: the ability to look at chaos and not only survive it, but shape it into opportunity. Captain Asha Vega and her crew, though still regarded by many with suspicion, were now granted access to the most sensitive coalition data, working side by side with alien scientists and engineers who had never before collaborated with outsiders. Vega, with her sharp instincts and deep love for the stars, focused not just on the weapons or enemy tactics, but on the stars themselves, believing that the answers lay in understanding what the enemy was truly doing to the heart of the galaxy. She and her team pored over stellar data, patterns of energy flow, and the subtle shifts happening in the fabric of space itself, until finally, through long nights of analysis and trial, they found something. A pattern hidden deep within the frequency of the stars that were under attack. The enemy's technology, while powerful, wasn't flawless. It required synchronization with the natural rhythm of a star's energy, and this connection had a slight delay, a brief moment of vulnerability during the harvesting cycle. It was a weakness so small, so fleeting, that only someone thinking far, outside the traditional rules of science and battle, could have noticed it. Vega knew that this was their chance. She proposed a plan, one that sounded impossible to many: a counterattack that would use the energy of the stars themselves, not to destroy, but to disrupt the enemy's control, turning their own method into their undoing. The plan required precise timing and complete trust between the coalition and the human fleet. Ships would have to fly dangerously close to unstable stars, feeding just enough energy back into the solar fields to interrupt the enemy's drain and cause a chain reaction that would render their weapons useless. The risk was immense. A single mistake could result in ships being caught in solar flares or crushed by gravitational pull, but the alternative was complete collapse. As the battle approached, both sides of the alliance trained together, shared information, and slowly began to trust in each other's strengths. Coalition commanders learned to respect human improvisation, and human officers grew to admire the discipline and deep knowledge of the alien tacticians. Across command decks and communication channels, voices that once argued now strategized together, their common goal overriding the old divisions. When the day of the strike came, the stars burned brighter than they had in weeks. The combined fleets launched in silence, each ship knowing its role and the cost of failure. As Vega's ship led the first wave, they moved into the enemy's occupied zone, flying faster and closer to unstable star fields than anyone had dared before. Enemy fire lit up the darkness, but the fleet pressed on. Coalition vessels opened, paths with shield pulses, while human fighters slipped through tight gravitational folds, delivering the specially designed energy bursts directly into the stars at the critical moment. The enemy, caught off guard by the sudden reaction of the stars, scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. One by one, the harvesting devices overloaded, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet and cutting off their power source. A matter of moments, the tide had turned. The once invincible enemy ships, now drifting and vulnerable, were surrounded by the united fleet. But instead of wiping them out entirely, the coalition, led by Vega's example, chose to disable and isolate them, hoping to study and understand more rather than destroy out of fear. The battle had not only saved star systems from destruction, but also created a powerful message across the galaxy: that unity through difference could become the greatest force of all. Among the wreckage and fading echoes of war, bonds were forged between species who had never truly understood each other. Captain Vega stood on the command deck, staring at the calm stars, knowing the war was not fully over, but that something far more important had been won. The turning point had not just been in strategy or science, but in trust, in learning that survival was not just about strength, but about sharing it. In the quiet that followed, coalition and human forces alike looked up at the stars with renewed wonder, knowing they had faced the darkness together, and for the first time truly stood as one. The stars had never seemed so peaceful. After the final battle, as the enemy fleet lay scattered and powerless, and the strange technology that once threatened to consume entire systems was now silenced, a deep stillness settled across the Andromeda sector. For the first time in months, the stars shone with their natural brilliance, untouched, untainted, as if they themselves were sighing in relief. Across the coalition, messages of victory echoed through every communication channel. But more than celebration, there was a sense of transformation, a quiet understanding that the galaxy had changed, not just because of survival, but because of unity. In the central hub of the coalition's Grand Council, leaders from every species gathered under the light of a massive viewing dome, where a sea of stars stretched beyond the glass like a living painting. There, in the heart of that moment, humanity was officially welcomed into the coalition not as outsiders or temporary allies, but as equal protectors of the galaxy. Captain Asha Vega and her crew stood before the gathered council, their uniforms singed from war, but their eyes bright with pride. The ceremony was simple, yet filled with meaning. Words were spoken in many languages, some translated, some shared through gesture and expression, but they all carried one message: that humanity, once seen as a reckless force of nature, had proven itself through courage, sacrifice, and an unshakable love for the stars. Vega, when invited to speak, didn't recite tactics or talk of power. She spoke of watching the night sky as a child on Earth, dreaming of touching those distant lights, and how every member of her crew carried that same dream inside them. She said it was never just about fighting an enemy. It was about protecting the wonder above, the endless mystery that gave purpose to every journey. Her words were quiet, but they stirred something deep in every listener, reminding them all why they had chosen peace in the first place. The respect that followed was not born from fear or strategy, but from something far older: shared wonder. Across the sector, humans and aliens worked side by side, rebuilding damaged stations, restoring failing planets, and mapping regions once sealed off by fear. Children from different worlds played under the same artificial skies, learning each other's languages, drawing pictures of warships not as weapons but as shields of light. Vega and her team, though heroes in the eyes of many, never claimed titles or rewards. Instead, they returned to their ship, to the quiet hum of the engines, and resumed patrol across the stars. Not as conquerors, but as watchers. They knew peace was never permanent. That darkness could always return from beyond the edges of known space. But they also knew something greater had been built: trust. The memory of what they had faced and overcome became a lesson for future generations, taught not in fear, but in hope. Monuments were not built of metal or stone, but of stories passed from one voice to another, of the day when humanity didn't come to claim, but to protect. As the seasons changed and the stars shifted slowly in the sky, new alliances formed between species who once spoke only through diplomats. Trade routes opened, scientific missions launched deeper into space. And on one quiet evening, Captain Vega walked alone on a small observation deck on a coalition outpost, watching the stars twinkle far beyond her reach. She smiled, not because she had won, but because for the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone among the stars. She thought of every risk taken, every argument with the council, every second of fear during battle, and knew it had been worth it. In that vast sky, she saw not just light but life, millions of lives, each different, each valuable, and each connected by the space between. And somewhere out there, others were watching the stars too, not in fear, but in wonder. The story of that war, of that turning point, would not be remembered as one of destruction, but of unity, when humans and aliens stood shoulder to shoulder, not as enemies or rivals, but as guardians. The stars, once in danger of being consumed, now belonged to all, and they glowed as if in silent approval. And so, the final page of this chapter closed not with the sound of guns or engines, but with a shared silence, filled with promise. For the love of the stars had brought them together, and that love, fierce and bright, would guide them for generations to come.